Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I too rise to talk on this notice of motion because it is important for Australia and for South Australia in particular, where, as the media has been highlighting, unemployment is an issue for South Australia. We are seeing numbers there that are the worst in the country, and we need to be working to see those numbers reduce. And indeed that's what the federal government is doing, and we encourage the state government to be working with us, as they are in some programs, but we also encourage those opposite and on the crossbench to work with us in terms of shaping the environment that allows people the confidence to invest and create jobs in South Australia. And I think it's important that we recognise that that environment is important as we come to talk about the automotive industry, the transformation scheme, and importantly the future that this government is seeking to shape. I'll just briefly talk about that context before I go on to the initiatives that the government's putting in place for the future, because those opposite have been making a number of claims that really do need to be put into context. The claim has been made that the closure of the automotive sector has occurred under this government's watch, but having been in the lower house as a member for Wakefield between 2004 and 2007, I know that even back then the large automotive companies were very focused on their global programs. I recall going to GM seeking to get their cooperation so that we could invest as a federal government, then the Howard government, into research and developing production techniques and battery technology for electric cars so that Australia could play a leading role in developing what was then going to be a niche market. After a number of meetings, it became very clear, in fact it was stated quite openly, that as far as GM were concerned, they were a global operation, they had their research centres, and I think Japan and the US were the two key ones, and no amount of incentive from Australia actually interested them in terms of where they would change the focus of their research effort. And so as we step forward and we see the response of the Australian consumer, who decide, and members of office have acknowledged this, that people have voted with their feet and their wallets, and over the years they have increasingly moved to cars that are manufactured in Europe or Asia, whether that's size or style or brand, who knows what the reason is. But the fact is, the volumes that were being produced here, even when we worked hard, and both sides of politics have tried to do this, to work hard to get export markets for our manufacturers, and Senator Gallagher correctly referred to the period where Holden in fact was able to increase their shifts again because we started to get an export market for cars into the United States. But even with that, the global nature of those businesses meant that they made the decisions that it was not economic to continue manufacturing here in Australia. And Mike Devereaux, who was the CEO of General Motors at the time, said that a decision had been made because of their long-term business case that it just did not stack up, and that those decisions were made quite separate from any government policies here in terms of the amount of subsidy or investment or co-investment that we wanted to make. So it's really important to recognise that there has been a change, and both sides can throw barbs. We can talk about things that the Labor Party did, they can talk about our approach of supporting free markets, but the reality is in the automotive sector the change has come about because of the global business model and the decisions, and in this case, and in my case of South Australia, that General Motors made in the States. So the question is, what are we going to do about that? And the Automotive Transformation Scheme is one of the responses that the Coalition is sticking with, in that that scheme has been in place. We're happy to stick with the guidelines on that to provide certainty to the industry, because that enables people to plan for the future, to transition and look for new opportunities. Now, there's a couple of aspects that I think are important in that. One, people who are involved in the component manufacturing sector do have opportunities that are being realised right now under the current scheme. And so let's look at Nissan Casting Australia. Everyone thought that with the wind down of vehicle manufacturing in Australia by 2017, they would be shutting up shop and their workforce would be dismissed and those jobs would be lost to Australia. In actual fact, what's occurred is that by working with the CSIRO, they have come up with new and improved manufacturing techniques, and working with overseas manufacturers from Nissan, they have made a decision now that they will continue to make parts for the Nissan Leaf, which is their electric vehicle, so that's a vehicle for the future that they'll continue to manufacture parts for, and 38 other models. And in fact, the demand is so high for them that because of their exports to Japan, the US, UK, Thailand, Mexico and South Korea, they are working 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to meet that demand. So even in this current environment, while people are saying the sky is falling, there is gloom everywhere, under the current rules, as they are, we see component manufacturers who are ramping up their production due to exports to the point where they have continuous operations. And it's not only in Victoria, in South Australia, my own state. We're seeing the Transformation Scheme assist people who've been involved in the automotive sector move from that sector into new sectors, and again, importantly, in terms of finding a market that is large enough that it will sustain production now and into the future. It's not domestic, that market is export. And so we see these people have moved from auto components, and so Heliostat SA, which is a subsidiary of what used to be Precision Components, now, using a $1 million grant, has moved into producing solar components for the Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems Corporation. So they're now exporting advanced manufacturing, high-value components overseas to Japan as an alternative. So that is 2 specific examples, but I'd like to refer the Senate to an article by Peter Gill in March this year in the In Daily, which is a South Australian online publication, where he looks at research that's been done by an international research house into the automotive sector, and this has been backed up by work done by the Productivity Commission. And their estimate is that after 2017, into the future, there will still be at least 50% of the auto parts sector that will continue. And they put that down to a number of things. One, as Senator Madigan, I think, or it might have been Muir mentioned, the aftermarket sector, which is growing at around 4% per year at the moment, the spare and replacement parts market, but importantly, that export market, which, as we've seen, is not only existing, but it's growing. And the potential is there for Australia because we are smart with our innovation. We do make high-quality, consistently high-quality products, and that's why we see things like differentials that are made in South Australia being exported around the world, because we can actually provide consistent, high-quality products into markets in Europe and other places, and compared to Europe, our labour costs are no higher than theirs. So those markets will continue, and if anything, they have the opportunity to grow, because this analysis that was done, that was being reported on by Peter Gill, was done at a time when there was parity with the Australian dollar and the US dollar. As our dollar comes off, that makes our products even more competitive. So what we're seeing there is that almost at a worst-case situation in terms of exchange rates, the industry will survive and in some sectors grow, and he's saying around 50%, but as that dollar comes off, there is a potential for that to increase even further. So what are the other aspects that the government's doing in terms of looking to create jobs? Well, the $155 million growth fund is one of the areas where we are seeking to work with industry and with state governments to put in place a balanced range of measures targeted to help the industry transition. Now, particularly for South Australia, one of the programs that's just been announced, which I'm very thankful for, is the Next Generation Manufacturing Investment Program. And round one of that has been announced with some $28.8 million to 15 businesses in South Australia. Importantly, one of the functions or one of the features of this program was that we needed to see co-investment by these businesses. So they said, look, we've got enough faith in what we're doing or what we're proposing in this new market that we'll stump up our own capital. And so this is leveraged complementary investment so that the total investment in new manufacturing capability is around $73.3 million. And that is good news, because what it means is that we're providing the opportunity for people who innovate in South Australia to capture the market. And we see, whether it's large primes like BAE Systems, who have acted as a catalyst to feed funding and focus for defence programs, so things like titanium milling to support the vertical tail fin production for Joint Strike Fighter, which is then farmed out to a lot of other second-tier SMEs around Australia who contribute to that, or whether we see companies like Levitt Engineering, who've won funds under this program, and they're producing parts for the Joint Strike Fighter engine. And we've seen their workforce not only grow, but importantly, grow in terms of the technology that they're using and the complexity of the manufacturing that they're doing. And so not only do they have the Joint Strike Fighter program, but they're now having a design and manufacturing quality and capacity that opens up future markets for them. One of the other significant recipients of funding under this is Sealy International, who is a fantastic South Australian company. In fact, Frank Sealy has been named in the past the South Australian of the Year for his contribution not only to manufacturing but also to South Australia and our community more broadly. And particularly, I look at the investment that he has made in things like the testing centre at Sealy International. So this is an internationally certified and recognised testing centre. So for the first time, we can compare different systems under controlled conditions and get very accurate results to companies who may want to design a specific system. And we see this going into everything from wineries through to commercial premises, educational premises, and sometimes where they have particular moisture requirements, then Sealy's are able to actually tailor the design of the product to meet the customer. And so not only is this good for South Australia, but the export potential is huge, because by using the natural cooling power of evaporation, this product, the Climate Wizard product that he's developed, dramatically reduces outdoor air temperature with very few moving parts, and it's achieved with a counterflow water-to-air heat exchanger. That's what I'm reading off the stuff from his website. And it's an innovation they hold a world patent on. But the reason that's important is because it actually reduces energy by up to 80%. Some of the clients who have bought this technology, they can use it as a standalone, or they can use it to precondition the air before it goes into a normal refrigerator type system. But we're seeing the energy demand fall by nearly 80%. So at a time when we're concerned about emissions, at a time where our society is rightly concerned about the cost of electricity and about the capacity of our networks to provide, what we're seeing here is funding coming out of this transformation scheme and this advanced manufacturing or manufacturing of the next generation manufacturing investment. We're seeing supporting development of this technology that has good environmental benefits. It has good technology benefits in terms of supporting and growing that innovation, but importantly, it's creating additional jobs so that will benefit workers in South Australia, it will benefit the South Australian economy, and it supports that innovative approach. So the government is not sitting on its laurels. It's keeping the ATS scheme in place, providing certainty to the sector. It's responding to the circumstances that it's inherited, and it's looking to the future, and it's encouraging to see the companies that I've named, Heliostat, Nissan, the study that's saying more than 50% of the sector in terms of automotive parts will survive, just in automotive, let alone those who transform into other areas, such as heliostat. But importantly, the co-investment between industry, the state and the federal government means that we are moving ahead, creating opportunity for jobs not just now, but jobs into an international market which provides a much longer term and more certain opportunity for export and for manufacturing work in South Australia and around the nation.
Thank you, Senator.